Bob Seely is a Conservative MP. He's also a member of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee and joins us. Good morning to you.
Morning.
Bob, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Look, before we talk about, I suppose what's going on in Ukraine at the moment and our support for Ukraine, and again, it's interesting when we've seen Joe Biden and some shilly-shallying over whether or not they were going to provide jets, these F-16 jets. Now it looks that they're not going to Ukraine. There's big issues about what we can provide and over defence cuts and our spending on defence and our number of people in our army. And this idea that, well, this claim from an unnamed American general that they no longer regard the UK as a tier one fighting force. Look, you've served in the British Armed Forces, you've served in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya and elsewhere. Are we still a tier one fighting force?
In terms of scale compared to the Americans and the Chinese, no, we're not on that scale because we don't have the mass. We have some of the kit, but we simply don't have the mass. However, we're still a really significant fighting force and one of the largest and most significant in the world. So I think the remark was more of a sort of said in a slight despair that because Europe and the UK, but more specifically Europe, wasn't investing in its defence. But look, we have a problem. For the last 20 years, we've hollowed out our defence far too much. And we need now to be investing in it. So I think Ben is being painfully honest, and congratulations to him as ever. Ben Wallace and James Heappey as well. They're a great pair of ministers. And look, they're thinking about what's in the national interest. And they're saying if we're not spending enough on defence, we need to be spending more. And I tend to agree with that because we've got to be strong in the world. Otherwise, we make more wars and conflicts much more likely if we're not.
This is the whole thing, speak softly but carry a big stick. The ability and the knowledge that you've got that. There's forces means that people and other people recognise that less likely to take action that will cause you to use those forces. We've seen some other countries around Europe, in particular, upping their percentage of their GDP and the real-time spending that they are spending on defence. Some of those, like Germany, though, frankly, because they've barely been spending enough, not even keeping up to their NATO commitments for some time. We've only been meeting our NATO commitment on a technicality, including things like armed forces, pensions. So do you think this has been, the whole Ukraine war has been a real wake-up call for the West in terms of, you know what, we can no longer go with the whole Cold War's over, great, we can get that peace dividend, and we need to recognise there are a whole new vast array of different threats, and actually spending on schools and hospitals and all of that is actually all going to be reliant on our ability to protect our nation state and protect our interests abroad.
Yeah, I completely agree, Julian. If you look back at World War I and World War II, if we had spent more on defence and were able to deter World War I and World War II, we would have saved tens of millions of lives throughout the world and vast sums of money. So that's what happens when you scrimp and you don't spend properly on your defence. You make big wars much more likely. So I think we absolutely need to invest far more. I mean, I was having a private conversation with one of our defence ministers, and I said, why aren't we sending more than 14 tanks? Why can't we send a regiment of tanks, 56 tanks, to make it worthwhile? And the unfortunate answer I got was that we probably only got a regiment of tanks that's usable right now, which is a pretty depressing thing to say. Now, do we want to be using those tanks tomorrow against Russia? No, I hope we never do. But the whole point about having defence is that it's an insurance policy, and if you run your insurance policy down, then
that's what happens. Can I ask you just finally, Boris Johnson has claimed that in a BBC documentary that Vladimir Putin threatened to kill him with a missile in a sort of very sort of James Bond baddie stroking a white cat sort of way. The readout of that phone call to the press gallery, the lobby journalists in Westminster, didn't make any mention of such a thing. The Kremlin has denied there was any such threat made to Boris Johnson in that phone call ahead of the invasion of Ukraine. Who do you believe?
I mean, I believe Boris, but maybe he misinterpreted. Who knows? Maybe Putin said it in sort of passing. Well, I can drop a missile on your. I don't know right now.
It wouldn't be the sort of thing that Downing Street would release anyway, would they?
No, it probably wouldn't be, because it's not the sort of thing that you release, because it's not the sort of thing that you probably do, sort of threaten other world leaders. So if he said it in passing, he may have said it in passing, and I think Boris pretty much said that this thing was said in passing. It was said half seriously. And I think, yet again, Putin was feeling the need to boast about his military prowess, which has been rather shown to be fairly feeble, frankly.
Indeed. Bob Seely, really appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much indeed.